everyone. Welcome back to Iron Bay Research. This is episode 3, where we're going to go into a little bit of my job history and just continue the conversation about talking and learning about money at an early age. So, as we were talking last time, what jobs do you do in high school? You had done the reffing. And
how you view money.
Yeah.
And we kind of hashed out how I viewed money and where I started. So I think now we can talk about what was your first job and how did you view money at that time?
Yeah. So I think the first things I was doing wasn't really a job, but like we had chores to do around the house. I think we were given like a $5 allowance a week, and we had to do like all the cleaning, all the outside chores, help out for whatever we can.
That's a controversial topic in of itself that we won't get into.
Yeah.
Allowance or no allowance. I was the no allowance type of family.
I'm pro allowance because I think it just shows like, hey, like money, it kind of gets you like, oh, I dumped something, here's $5. I think the amount of allowance is up for debate.
Yeah.
But
my family was the type of, if you want to live here and eat from the fridge, chores are a necessity.
Yeah. My parents were also like really strict with cleaning.
Yeah.
I mean, it was every weekend. It was like a whole house deep clean, like the windows, mopping, dusting, like head to toe, everything every week.
That was us every day.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe parents
so
don't like you. I don't know. Maybe you're bad at cleaning.
To be continued. We have a 2-year-old, so you guys will know in 10 years if you continue to follow us what if our teenager's getting allowance.
Yeah, I think it's appropriate, but
okay.
anyway.
Anyways, your first job.
Yeah. So the first thing I started doing for money was I wanted to go above and beyond and say like, hey, I want to do more around the house, and so I started taking on more roles. Like, hey, like I want to pick up the lawn mowing. I'll wash my parents' cars. I'll help. I was getting really heavy into landscaping
because you liked to do it, or you liked the money was the motivator.
Money was a motivator. Like I wanted more of my allowance. I was like, well, hey, if I'm getting paid this, I think like the first thing I was doing was like I'll wash the cars for like $5 and I'll wash all of them. And like whether that price was wrong, it was showing more work equals more pay.
Okay.
And so I was
and you liked that.
Yeah, and I liked that. It was giving me something to do, and so I was really driving in that direction. And then from there, I can't remember which one came first. Actually, no, I do remember. I started doing landscaping jobs for neighbors in our street. Like I would go door to door and be like, hey, can I mow your lawn? Do you have literally any chores that you want me to do? I was doing that. I would go there, I'd get a little list, like a to-do list, like, hey, I want the weeding done, the shrubs done, whatever, and I would come back that day or later and then, do the work. And then I was charged per hour.
You probably came to my parents more times than once because this was pre-Bryce.
Yeah, I had done your parents' leaves, and I remember there was another job
just to see me, not for the money, right?
I mean, your dad paid me, so yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
I had a dowry. It was leaves.
Yeah, you had a fling with the gardener. But so I was doing that. And it was decent money, you'd go somewhere, you'd mow someone's lawn for $25 or whatever. I had a really hard time collecting money because this was before like cell phones were really a thing.
Oh, sure. And they didn't just pay you after you knocked on the door?
Well, sometimes you had to I had to wait for a day that it was good. Like, the sun was out, so I had to mow it. Well, I first had to talk to them, and I had to mow it, and then I had to collect it, and they had to be there. So it was really weird.
So sometimes you didn't finish the job while they were there, like they would leave.
And I would have to come back and get the money later. But there was a lot of people on my street that I saw, like, hey, I mowed your lawn yesterday. So that was really clumsy. And yeah, like it's a first business, and it was really chaotic, but, it was making money. So, but it was fun. Did that and did the snow shoveling in the winter. So like odd jobs, really just running around, all under the table.
And that in comparison to, let's say, Bryce has 2 sisters, to your siblings.
Yeah.
Do you think they had the same view on money at that age that you did, or do you think you were different?
I think I was a bit different from Chloe. Chloe was more my younger sister. She was more. Well, they were both much better athletes than I was, so they were really heavy into the sports. But I think in terms of like really loving working. I know that was my thing.
At that age,
yeah. My older sister, Alexa, I think she was definitely there, but she had a lot of jobs, too. She worked at Starbucks. Mm-hmm. I think she was babysitting a lot. And then my younger sister, I had actually left the house. I was in the military when she was going through that stage. I don't really know exactly.
I would say I think
could ask her, yeah.
from an outsider looking in, as an observer of your family, to me, obviously we could analyze each of you individually, but that's not what this is about. But to me, you guys all had similar work ethic in that way and enjoyed working just on the surface level. That's what it looked like to me. So I just think that that's interesting that you both had the same parents and similar upbringing.
Yeah.
And you had the same outlook on money. So it's just interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas on the flip side, my sister and I would say also similar. We both, actually it wasn't. My sister really liked working, I think, like you guys, and she was always working. Whereas me, like we said in the last conversation, it was kind of dragging feet a little bit. So, but my sister and I both had the same influence as well. So it's just interesting to me that all three of you guys, I think, were the same. And my sister and I were a little bit opposite. So I'd be curious to know other people's siblings, if you guys were different, if you were the same.
Like twins.
Or how that was. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think it has to go to, it's like if you had other interests. You know what I mean? Because you were like really into soccer.
That's true.
So
and my sister started to step away from sports. So then she got heavily into working.
Yeah.
So maybe that does make sense.
Yeah. And I was a little bit like, I like making money.
Money was your sport.
Yeah. And I got to, like, I worked with who I liked. Like I worked with, when I was doing the landscaping, I worked with a lot of my friends. And it got to the point too where I got a truck and then we started doing bigger jobs. I mean, it wasn't anything impressive. It was literally just, hey, I've got 3 guys with me. Let's do something bigger. You know, we could mow lawns faster. We could do bigger jobs.
But the fact that you took that responsibility on and were thinking like that at that age, like for me, I would never. I was like, I need a leader. And so it's just interesting that you naturally stepped into that position because you saw that it had success as an individual and you could really. Yeah. So how did that get big then? I would bring up Mr. Nuremberg maybe.
Oh, yeah. Too, yeah. So, I remember I was going around high school and asking, any of the teachers, and say, hey, do you have any chores for me to do or anything like bigger? And then I had a guidance counselor, Mr. Nuremberg, super nice guy.
Shout out.
Yeah, he was one of those guys where, like, if I was late, like, a decent student, he'd write me, like, a hall pass or whatever. But he had actually helped me, like, make little... business cards, yeah. And so I didn't have a credit card, so I think I remember I gave him like the $10-$15 and he'd use his credit card to do it. It was a very cool relationship, and I had done some work from him at his house, and then I took those and put the little cards in people's mailboxes. Again, like nothing, they didn't really get big, but it definitely put a good amount of money in my pocket in high school to like take you out on dates, go to movies, buy like shoes and clothes and stuff like that, and spend money where I wanted to spend it.
So while I was playing soccer, Bryce was working. He paid for our whole relationship.
Hey, it's old. It works. It's old school. Yeah. So I think that goes into me now. And yes, I understand that there's different dynamics where, could have ran better this and that. But I think that's why even today, I kind of struggle with people not being able to find work. Like I get it. It can be hard. But I think you're trying to put money in your pocket. I've always been of the attitude to like, literally just go to your neighbors and act. Like, if you see that your neighbor's getting their lawn mown by a service, I think you could indicate that they don't want to do it. Sure. So do it for, like there's always, and now with this, there's so many signs that show when someone doesn't want to do something, you could fill that void for you if you're struggling to find a job. Yeah. And I get that the job market's very hard, and that's not the way to find a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 job. But if you're working a job and it's like, hey, if I could have an extra $300, $400 a week or a month, I think even that little amount, it makes a difference. So I've always just been of that attitude. Like, fill it with the littler jobs to help supplement your lifestyle. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting and something we can segue into later. But just to brush over it is... where we learned about money, I'll ask you that same question in a second, but for myself, I think money was a little bit taboo in my house because my parents were doing well from an outsider looking in. We had a great childhood. My sister and I had everything we needed and it was great, but
my parents were a little bit stressed in that way. So I think that they lacked the confidence to share knowledge with us because they weren't sure if it was the right knowledge that they needed to share, which is totally fine. I get that, and that's fair. So for me, though, we kind of grew up together. I learned everything I needed to know about money from you.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. I think that created a bond, a different type of bond in our relationship where you brought everything to the table there knowledge-wise, and I just followed you, and it was, I think, built a lot of trust in our relationship in that way. You were... I don't, that's going to sound weird saying like a father figure money wise for me, but money wise, you were a figure that you money wise, you were a figure that I looked up to. So it's just, I would be interested to know who that person was in other people's lives. Like when they started to look at money differently and go, oh, this is, obviously, you know, that's up for debate too. What is happiness? We're not going to go into that. But money-wise, obviously, you do need it to survive. So I'd be interested to know who that figure was in other people's life that was like, oh, I really should start thinking about this stuff. And for you, was that your parents? Or who was that for you?
I remember we had this talk in the car. What were you doing? Anyways, but I can't... I know it was... We still had like those... same taboos, like you don't ask what people make, and I was always curious as a kid. Like I just
your parents taught that to you too. Like you shouldn't. Really.
Like don't bring it up. But I think we talked about it in some aspects. I think with the allowance, we knew that was, we talk about it there. Well, I think a big thing too is, and so my mom's full Filipino. In our household, we used to gamble a lot. Like any sort of game we would play. Like, you're putting money on the table. And nothing big, but it always had a dollar value. Like, any family event, like, there's a Filipino card game called Pasoy or 13 card poker. Absolutely love it. We would
now my favorite.
Yeah, we would play it all the time as kids. I mean, I remember my grandma, we always joke about it to this day. I mean, if you're stepping up to the table, even as a young kid, I think, 10 or 11, it's your money. Like, they're not going to stop you, and they're going to take your money. My grandma had cleaned me out several times.
Me too.
Funny enough, she'd visit me and give me $20 and probably end up taking it back with poker. But I think it's a good lesson to learn that, like, hey, like, these are real things. Like, this money isn't fake, it's real.
And really quick before you continue, bringing it back to the allowance thing.
Yeah.
When you bring up that aspect, I could see the benefits of allowance rather than, I was looking at it as a character not necessarily flaw, but a character thing. Whereas, like, if you get allowance, that means that rather than you should do chores because you're getting housed and fed.
Yeah.
But when you bring up from a business standpoint, I actually do see the benefit in allowance because it's almost like gives you the thought process of you're running your own business.
Yeah.
So in that way, I can get on board.
Well, it puts like a time frame too, because all of a sudden it turns a $5 bill into a week of chores.
Right.
Like, hey, what did I do for this $5?
And then you learn ROI. You learn return on investment at a really young
holy
age.
Crap.
Is that worth it? Yeah.
Yeah, I did a lot of chores for this $5 bill. Should I go spend this at McDonald's? Or should I save it and eat at home? It just...
Right.
I agree. I think paying your kids to do something is
maybe not from a character
silly,
standpoint,
but it's not like I was a W-2
business
employee at my house. It was just like, hey, here's some money. Let's get it thinking. So I think that did help.
Yeah. But as far we were talking about a figure, do you have someone that you looked at?
Yeah.
Even celebrity or someone? Was there anyone that you looked at and you were like, I want to embody that, or did you just kind of feel the motivation from the get-go?
I still struggle with that question. I think it was a little bit of everything. So, like...
Sure.
So my mom was stay-at-home mom. My dad was in the military, and he was gone pretty much all the time. And I do remember, though, when they came back home. I always knew they dabbled in real estate. I didn't know to what extent. But when he came back, they would flip houses. They had a couple rentals. And I just always saw that, like...
The hustle.
You always just hustled. Like, that's just what you did. And so I think that embodied me, plus, like, the chores with the money and just being somewhat open about money and talking about it. I think that definitely helped. And I think I liked having cash in my pocket in high school. Even at a young age, I just liked having cash in my pocket. So I think that drive helped. And then you're sitting there and analyzing, well, like, back to the landscaping, I was like, yeah, why would I go to the mall and make $7 an hour when I can
make 25 from
mowing a
Mrs.
lawn?
Fry up the street?
Yeah, it just didn't make sense to me.
Right.
So I guess going back to that.
Wiser beyond your years for sure. I think we started to talk about this off camera. We wanted to save it for off camera. Now I think is a good time to go into what we were about to say in the bathroom was what wiser beyond your years, return on investment. We think it's beneficial for kids to start thinking about okay, that's what we were saying. Last conversation we had, I disagreed that I said 14-year-olds have a flawed view at that age, and you're saying we are capable because I was, so why can't everyone else be? So how do we talk about that? Like, do you think it's our parents' responsibility to show our kids to start learning at that age, or can schools even implement it? What's your view on that?
Well, I don't even think it's not like you can, it's you need to. Because if you think about it, like, it's not an insane thought, right?
Sure.
I mean, you graduate from high school, you're 17. And, at that point in your life, you're doing two things. Most people are trying to look at college, and which we can talk about in the later episode, I think can be, college is important, but it can also be the worst mistake of your life.
Sure.
If you don't do it correctly. And so you are 3 years away from making that decision, or if you don't do that, I mean, heck, I enlisted when I was 19. I had friends that enlisted when they were 17.
Sure.
So I think it's insane that people aren't even addressing this conversation.
2 years prior.
2 years prior.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's nonsense to say, like, you're too young. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Honestly.
No, you're right. You're right.
I think you need to talk about it earlier because, I mean, 17, 18, people are having kids, you're looking at careers. Like, it is so pivotal to be talking at now. So we had talked about just understanding, like, just because a job, like, when you apply for a job, you have to look about the benefits as a whole. So I think you have to analyze everything. So going back to analyzing, just, doing, like, I just knew more money was important. I didn't know how to get it.
Right.
Did I segue?
No, that answered my question. Yeah. And I think whether who it comes from at home or from school, I think everyone, but we're not here to be political, so we don't need to say that. But I would say, no matter who it comes from, it is important, and we can both agree on that, is if when you're 18 or you graduate high school, you're told, okay, now you need to make the biggest decision of your life. What are you going to do?
Practice early.
And why aren't you practicing decision making early in its basic form? And you should be, and that's true.
Yeah. And I would say this too. It's regardless of whose job it is to tell you, if you don't learn, you are the one that suffers.
Yes,
like
that's true.
It is your responsibility, because let's say, like,
to figure it out.
That's how you get people who are like, who don't know, but later on, like, oh, I was never taught. Learn, like, you have to. I mean, you can sit there.
You're right. It is a scapegoat.
Sounds tough. You can sit there
it is
and
a
complain
scapegoat
about
to
it,
say that,
or you can just take responsibility and learn it. Like that's kind of like the tougher side of my opinions of just.
You're right.
Whoever's fault it is. Maybe it isn't your fault. Maybe you were dealt a bad hand. It happens. I get it.
Right.
But you're still the one that suffers. So are you going to put your fate on someone else?
Why reflect on, well, I should have just change it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Learn now. It's never too late.
If you know it's an issue, it's always, well, what are you doing now to adjust this?
Yeah. Obviously, knowing what I know now about investing, and with Bryce, I wishes this is what we were doing at 18 or even before.
Oh, yeah.
But
I mean, just...
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. It's never too late to learn. Pick up a book and do it now.
Yeah.
Watch a YouTube video. We've watched our fill of YouTube videos from other people that are way wiser than us, and that's how we've learned. So we hope that you take something from this. But I think to wrap it up, your high school working experience.
Yeah, I want to go to the road painting. I think that was a really
okay, and then we'll finish up. Okay, good point. So landscaping, then what?
Yeah, so I was I had a neighbor named Tobias, and I'm still very grateful. He offered me a great job. We were doing a big project at our house. I think we were moving like a lot of dirt or something, like building like a retaining wall, and he came over to help. And yeah, he'd offered me a job because he worked for a company that did the road painting. I'm looking at the screen. Sorry, the road painting for like parking lots and roads, like the yellow white lines. And they would do like the signs too, like the parking signs, whatever it may be. That's what he worked for at a company. And he offered me a job. It was $10 an hour.
And this is in the DC area. That's where Bryce and I grew up.
Yeah, yeah.
We grew up in the suburb of Virginia, just south of DC.
Like North Virginia area. And it was $10 an hour, and then $11 if you worked at like the night shift. And it was a lot of hours. I mean, we were working 10, 12, 16-hour days sometimes. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do it. And I remember I worked there, and that was hard work. I mean, those 5-gallon buckets, I mean, they weigh 80, 90 pounds, something like that. I can't remember, but it's much heavier than water. And my role was a helper, and so I would just do a lot of like the moving material around, getting the paint ready, like prepping, and then Tobias, he was the guy in the machine actually painting. And you know, he made decent money doing that, and the jobs, these were like professional jobs. I remember we did like a big IKEA parking lot. We did a lot of parking lots. We did GMU, George Mason University, all the parking lots around there. And then, yeah, I think that was my first kind of experience of like long days working hard hours, but like consecutively. Because like landscaping, I'd work long hours, but not like, hey, we're working 7 days straight for 12, 14-hour days.
But you really saw the fruits of your labor there because in that time, minimum wage, this was 16 years ago, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I remember I was a
minimum
junior.
wage for us, for me, was $7.75 is what I was making at Bob Evans.
Yeah.
So which is the exact time you were doing road painting, you were making like almost $4 an hour more than what your peers were making at that time.
And I wasn't,
which is massive.
And we talked
and
about
getting more hours.
The benefits.
Yeah.
About your take-home pay, because I remember my take-home pay checks, and it was, I mean, you know, we were pocketing like $1,000, $2,000 checks, which at that time, at that age, that was like a lot of money. And I remember I brought in my friend Josh, and then we brought in another friend, Eddie and Jesse, and we were all, and we felt like we were rolling in the dough. Yeah, so I didn't want to play sports and something.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I was like,
you
oh,
wanted
I
to
want to go work. This is very productive for my time.
Right.
And I think from there, that's when it really just clicked of just like, that's when it all came to place. I was like, wow, I can do this. I can, you know, worst case scenario, I can work this job. And then I remember senior year in high school, I had to talk with Tobias. And this was a good talk. I think I remember this conversation to the day, and I remember like the first big decision. Because I was unsure. I knew you were going to go to Radford. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go to college. I didn't really know. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't really see the point. But I knew I still wanted to be with you. And I remember Tobias, they were looking to like promote me up to the next level, which was a painter. You're on the machine.
Right.
And those guys are salary. And it was decent pay. I mean, for like blue collar work, it was decent, right? I can't remember what it was.
And at that point, you would have been on the payroll,
yeah,
salary, getting benefits, the whole shebang.
I think it was like 50-ish grand a year, something like that. Out of high school, like that's great.
Oh God, yeah. Because out of college, we'll get into that. I was making way less than that.
It was like 25 or 30 bucks an hour. But anyway, the point is, he said it was like, I want to train you to do this, but I don't want to waste my time if you're going to be going to college in 6 months. And that was such an important lesson of just like, oh yeah, like here comes this big decision.
He's going to do what's in his best interest, but he also wants to take a chance on you, but he's not going to waste his time.
It has to align. Like, it's a big decision for me, but it's a waste of his time. Mm-hmm. If you bail. Yeah, you have to do these things that where all the incentives and everyone's motives are aligned. Like, back to the mall discussion you're saying, it's in the manager's interest to give these high school students a 2-hour shift here, a 3-hour shift there.
Because they don't want to piss off their other employees who are putting in the time.
There's no benefit to the person. So everything has to align. Yeah. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I guess if we're making it into equation, good business equals happy employee, happy leadership.
Yeah, everyone has to
be
win.
happy for the business to do well,
Yeah.
or else it's not going to work.
And that's a whole nother conversation when we start talking about, eventually we're going to get to like the business, analyzing businesses and how they treat people.
Yeah.
But I think this all building up into your decisions make a difference.
Yeah.
And, and then after that, it was straight to college.
Yeah.
And then
we can talk about that in the next episode.
Yeah.
Do you want to recap what we talked
I think this
about?
is a really good stopping point. So, I think it's interesting to show that, she worked for the most, you did some dog sitting too.
Oh, yeah.
For the most,
and babysitting.
Yeah.
That was what I loved to do. And actually, that's where I made the most money was because people value that, taking care of their...
Are we just preaching work under the table?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what we're doing here. So,
and cut.
Yeah, so I guess the point is between the two of us, we'd worked a lot of different jobs, and we saw the different results, but I think the road painting was definitely the best result of all those, but that was a perfect alignment of the employees were getting what they wanted and the business got what they wanted, and it just shows it's possible.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I think talking about money, introducing this conversation at an early age, 14, 15 is not early.
Yeah.
That is because people are making this massive decision that's life altering within 2 to 3 years. And if they don't know what money is or have never talked about the conversation, they're going to get hit by a truck when that conversation happens. And it's like, good luck on you.
Yeah.
So,
which we can talk about me getting hit by a truck in regards to money.
Yeah.
With
I think
the loan
we can
thing,
talk about
and we'll
college
get into that. Yeah.
Okay. So with that,
hope you guys enjoyed this. We really enjoyed that. That actually kind of opened up some stuff that we've never analyzed ourselves before. Yeah. So we look forward to the next conversation. If you guys want to give us your thoughts on some controversial things we talked about this episode, what you think about college, how young should you start?
For not paying taxes 10 years ago.
Longer away than that.
Got us some breaks.
And then, we'd love to hear your thoughts, interact with us, and tune in for the next episode.
Yeah, all right.
We'll
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this and want more, subscribe or comment below. We'll see you here next time on Iron Bay Research. Bryce and Kara signing out.